We tried to stay out of the war. It had been going for 3 years already in Europe. We were trying to stay out, but when Pearl Harbor was hit by the Japanese, we're now in the middle of the war. We had not been prepared for it. We mentioned this the other day. We were still using World War I planes and ships. And so what happens is we get into an immediate gear up for war. America still was not thinking about war. They were thinking about staying out of it. So it's interesting to see that once we got hit and with the Japanese at Pearl Harbor, over the next 4 days, there were 6 declarations of war. As soon as we got hit, we declared war on Japan. Japan said, we meant to tell you we're declaring war on you before we hit you, but yeah, we're declaring war on you too. And then Hitler said, well, if you're going after Tojo, I'm going after you. Great, we'll go after you. And Mussolini said, well, if you're going after my friends Tojo and Hitler, I'm going after you. Great, we'll go after you too. So in 4 days, you had 6 declarations of war that happened. The State of the Union address was only 4 weeks later. The State of the Union address given by Franklin Roosevelt, he's telling the American people, now we're at war. Here's what this is all about. We tried to stay out of it. Listen to what FDR says.
The world is too small to provide adequate living room for both Hitler and God.
Yes.
In proof of that, the Nazis have now announced their plan for enforcing their new German pagan religion all over the world. The plan by which the Holy Bible and the Cross of Mercy would be displaced by Mein Kampf and the swastika and the naked sword.
Did you hear the rhetoric?
Wow.
Yeah. God versus Hitler, Mein Kampf versus the Bible, the Cross of Mercy versus a swastika and naked sword. That's what led to this U.S. government war poster right here.
Yeah,
this
that's
is the
deep.
enemy. Now, the enemy is anybody who attacks the Bible. Think how many political movements and philosophical things would be this today. This is printed by the U.S. government printing office. This is how we raised money to fight. This is based on what the president gave us stated. Nobody says separation church and state. You can't do that. We did that. Matter of fact, you see other war bond posters. Here you have people praying. Here's the birth of Christ, the nativity. Down here, Franklin Roosevelt, the family gathered around a cross. Over here, Vice President Wallace, strong in the strength of the Lord, we find the people's cause. I mean, this is the kind of stuff we were doing. Now, we had lots of other posters as well, but we certainly didn't exclude God from anything we did. So now that we've got this thing going, we have enlistments like crazy. People showed up just like after 9/11. People, our son went and enlisted in the Army in 9/11 because after 9/11 had been hit, he wanted to go serve his country. All over America that happened in World War II. So people go and enlist. As they enlist, they get a package of, here's what you need to do to be ready for war, Army life. You're going off to basic training. Here's how many weeks it'll last. Here's how you get your checks back to your family. Here's what you expect. Here's what you bring with you. We gave them things like we have over here, the compasses they got, the boot polishing kit, the sewing kit, foot powder, everything you need, you're going to need. They also gave everyone Bibles. Now, here's an Army Bible. Here's a Navy Bible. The Army Bible, I open it up. On the inside, it gives you information. It says, look, just put your name and your branch here. Don't say what regiment unit you're with. If this falls in enemy hands, that's too much information. So then on the next page, it has the American flag, and it has a letter from President Roosevelt saying, guys, read the scriptures. We need you to read the scriptures here. So we had both Christian and Jewish scriptures. Here's the Protestant, Catholic, and Jewish scriptures. So we've got that from the president. And this happens to be the Navy one here. And the Navy one, it's got the guy's name on the inside. It says U.S. Navy. He did what he's supposed to. You open it up, and it's got the same letter from the president. But the difference is, if I can open both these up at the same time, the difference is the flags.
Yep.
The Navy one has a Christian flag flying higher than the American flag. That would send people through the roof. That you can't do that. No, even in the U.S. flag code today, the only flag that's allowed to fly higher than the American flag is the flag calling you to divine service. See up there, World War II? So twice a day on ships, the divine flag goes up. Jewish or Christian, either one, God goes above country, even in the U.S. flag code today. So that's part of what happened. As we move through, we finally get to where that we've got enough military, we've done enough stuff that we're going in on D-Day. D-Day was a remarkable operation. We showed you some of these maps. These are actually duplicates. We have the originals. They're very delicate. These are the landing maps they had when they went in. I'll pass some of these around. But I want you to consider the human intelligence that it took. Somebody had to walk the beaches to find where every one of these locations were. That's for 60 miles of beaches. So as those 52 craft landed, the front gate went down. This is what all the soldiers were looking at. Okay, when I come off the gate over there, I watch out for machine guns. Over there, they got mortars. This is amazing stuff they had. And by the way, along with that, when everybody, as they went ashore, they had one of the, yes.
So one thing too, so like the landing maps you're holding, we have the originals in the next room. So a few things out here like the landing maps we make duplicate copies of. That way students can hold them and see them, and we're not going, oh my gosh, be careful. But then there are some things that are really durable, like this is an original map he's holding up. That's super durable. So a lot of the stuff is original, but then there are some things that are a little more delicate that we keep in a little more protected facility since we do have school groups and students coming through here.
But we do have the originals. Now this is an original landing map. This is a D-Day map. We had all these guys going ashore. This is a silk map. I have a number of silk maps up here. There were 4,400 different silk maps made. Not the same copy, 4,400s. 4,400 different silk maps. This is the one for D-Day. It talks about Belgium and Germany and France, which is where we're landing. Now what'd you do with this? Well, what you did was you took this and you rolled it up very tightly. You put it under your collar. Because if you get captured by the Germans, they're going to frisk you for ammunition, knives, what? They're not going to frisk you for clothing. And so this is an escape map. Of the 36,000 Americans that were captured by the Germans, 18,000 escaped using these maps. So this is how they got out. Once they got free of the concentration camp, this tells them where the cities are, what to avoid, how to stay out of it. These are just absolutely amazing to me. Here happens to be a naval map for one of the missions that was going on. It talks about where this area is, but in it, it shows you all the ocean currents and where to get for a current to take you to this island, that island, whatever. So if you're a pilot and got shot down and you got your raft, you got to get your raft over there about 170 yards and it'll take you to that island. If you go 100 yards this way, it'll go to that island. And so we knew where the enemy was, and we knew, this is just fascinating me. 4,400 different missions we sent guys in with these silk maps. So if you splash down, water's not going to hurt this map, whatever. So those are the kind of things we had. So as D-Day happens, what we did was the Germans knew we were coming in, talked about this the other day, so we had to convince them we're not coming to where everybody knows we're coming. And so we got half the Germans to pull out and going from Spain all the way on up the Mediterranean to the east. And so when we landed, we still lost 3,000 guys, but we kept it a total secret all the way. Now, FDR, every day, he is telling the people what's going on, his fireside chats. He tells, here's what happened in Italy yesterday, here's what... Nothing mentioned about D-Day until we were landing. When we were landing, now operation's been going for hours, now we're landing, now I'm going to tell you we're landing. Listen to how FDR announced the landing of the Americans on D-Day.
My fellow Americans, last night when I spoke with you about the fall of Rome, I knew at that moment that troops of the United States and our allies were crossing the Channel in another and greater operation. It has come to pass with success thus far. And so, in this poignant hour, I ask you to join with me in prayer. Almighty God, our sons, pride of our nation, this day have set upon a mighty endeavor, a struggle to preserve our republic, our religion, and our civilization, and to set free a suffering humanity. Lead them straight and true. Give strength to their arms, stoutness to their hearts, steadfastness in their faith.
And he went for 6.5 minutes. He prayed for 6.5 minutes. He led the nation in prayer for 6.5 minutes. That's the announcement of D-Day. That year, Christmas of 1944, the D-Day prayer became the White House Christmas card. This is what he gave to his cabinet members. This has got the presidential seal on it. That was the Christmas card in 1944, was the D-Day prayer. So again, think of the tone back then versus where we are now, and we think what we do now is so constitutional. Did they not understand the Constitution back then? No, we just had judges who have perverted it since then. So we got D-Day going on. Once we get D-Day going on, the plan is, all right, the Americans are going to drop down to the south from France, and the Russians are over on their side. Now we're going to squeeze Germany back into Germany. The Americans will go from the west to the east. The Russians will go from the east to the west. We'll get them put in there. We have a 1,200-mile front along there that the Americans have. We know the Germans are going to try to break out that front. They're going to try to get on the back side of it. So we expect that. We just didn't expect where they would try to do it. They tried to do it at our weakest point, but that was high in the Alps. And we never figured that they could get 1,800 Panzer tanks and 250,000 German troops up to the highest part of the Alps. They did. And that happened to be held at that time by General Patton. And so that's the Battle of the Bulge. The Battle of the Bulge are the Germans trying to break through. It should have been an easy battle. We had air superiority at that time. We just get our planes up, we pound the German tanks, no problem, except it went for weeks where we could not get a break in the weather. We couldn't get our planes off the ground. Our guys on the ground can't, with bullets, stop German Panzer tanks. And so here come all these tanks, and they're breaking through. If they get behind the Americans, now we're going to have to do another invasion further back in Spain and push them in. So it's really big stuff. At this point in time, General Patton calls for his chief of chaplains for the Third Army, General James O'Neill. O'Neill came in, and Patton looked at him and said, "O'Neill, you got a prayer for weather?" And O'Neill said, "I don't know, sir, I'll check." And he checked. He came back and said, "I checked the prayer books, don't have a prayer for weather. I will write you a prayer for weather." He said at that point, Patton turned his back on him. He walked over to the wall, looked out a window, put his hands behind his back, and looking out the window, talked over his shoulder. He said, "Chaplain, do our men pray?" He said, "Certainly, sir. We have chaplains. That's why we have chaplains for services." "No. Do our men pray?" "Well, there's no atheists in foxholes." "Sure, they pray." He says, No. I want every man in the Third Army praying. Do our men pray?" So what happened was General James O'Neill came up with this card. It's signed by General Patton. It has a prayer for God to change the weather. This went out to all 250,000 members of the Third Army, and they started praying this prayer. It's a great prayer, and whether somebody want to read it out loud, somebody close?
Sure.
Read it loud.
Okay. To each officer and soldier in the Third United...
Oops, my bad, that's the wrong side. Take
okay.
that one.
Prayer. Almighty and most merciful Father, we humbly beseech Thee of Thy great goodness to restrain these immoderate rains with which we have had to contend. Grant us fair weather for battle. Graciously hearken to us as soldiers who call upon Thou that armed with Thy power. We must advance from victory to victory and crush the oppression and wickedness of our enemies and establish Thy justice among men and nations. Amen.
So, 250,000 soldiers get this. It's signed by Patton on the back. It's got a Christmas greeting on the back because this is Christmas of 1944 when the Battle of the Bulge is happening. They get this distributed. 2 days later, the weather breaks. They get the planes in the air. They pound the tanks. It's over. So, quick answered prayer. General Patton called General O'Neill back in and gave him a special medal, special commendation for having his prayers answered. So even Patton thought that was a big deal. So that's what kind of turned the Battle of the Bulge. So now as we start getting into Germany, we're now finding things that we've heard about but we didn't have evidence on, and it was the Holocaust type stuff. When Eisenhower got the first report on the Holocaust, they came to him and said, "Sir, you're not going to believe what we're seeing. You got to come see this." He went and looked, and he stopped them. He said, "Don't anybody do anything." He said, "I want photographers in here because no one's going to believe what we're seeing and what we're finding here." So he had photographers come in. While the war is still going on, Eisenhower came out with this book. I'm not going to pass it around. It's just too delicate, but it's April 1945, and it is loaded up with the pictures they took of what they found at the Holocaust. The stacks of bodies that were there. We talked to one of the 8 Jewish guys that was with Eisenhower. We interviewed him on radio a couple of years ago, I guess, and he said that Eisenhower was soaking, and by the way, if you can see this guy there, the bones, you see how frail he is? This guy told us the average weight of the surviving guy in the concentration camp was 103 pounds when they got there. They were allowed 300 calories a day of food. That's their daily ration. And the beds here, I've been to these concentration camps. These beds were designed for one man. There's 5 to 6 men in each one of those beds. I mean, it was unbelievable. And the ovens that were there, and all the people that had been gassed. I've got 2 of these books. They came out with a second one because as they found more concentration camps, they kept exposing them. So Eisenhower does that. Then he says, all right, now go bring all the people in, make them see this. Because the churches at that time, when they would hear the screams from the concentration camps, would just sing their hymns louder. So, we'll handle the guilt by saying, how crazy. And so the pictures in there of the people seeing what they were ignoring. And this is what you allowed to happen. You put a leader in office and you voted for him. We actually have ballots where people voted for Hitler over there. It's interesting, you got to vote for Hitler. He's the only name on the ballot. So he can say, I was elected. Yeah, well, there was no other choice kind of thing. So you have that going. We just recently came up with this letter. This letter is just, it's pretty unbelievable. It's a guy that at the time was part of the military police that had just gone into another concentration camp. That's the actual letter, Tim? Oh, got it. Gone into concentration camp. And so he writes what he's seen. He said, I wrote you about the slave labor camp, and I said I didn't care to see anything like that again, but I heard yesterday morning that I missed part of it, and I went back yesterday afternoon and got my belly full. I went through what they called a laboratory, which was one of the worst things you could think of. They had a cross-section of a man's head in a jar, and a head that had been shrunk to the size of my fist. First they boiled it in boiling water and then filled it with hot sand. The hair is still there. It's perfect. Then they have every part of a human body in glass jars. They would get slaves in with tattoos on their bodies and peel the skin from them and make lampshades from the tattoos. And he just goes on and on. And actually, we have the photographs that went with it. This is where the officers are looking at it. The lampshades with tattoos is human skin on the lampshades. There's shrunken heads there. There's a head in a jar. All this stuff is what they were finding. This sewing machine here happens to be out of one of the slave labor camps. This is where Jews were forced to sew machines for the Nazi soldiers. And then they were killed after they sewed uniforms for Nazi soldiers. Then they were killed. So a lot of stuff there. So anyway, we finally get Germany shut down. Germany, it's over. This is the declaration for the end of war with Germany, signed by Harry Truman. It's a proclamation for prayer and thanksgiving. Thank God this is over. 40 million lives lost. Now we turn all of our attention to the Pacific theater. We do the island hopping. We just go. We did not lose a single battle. Once we whipped Germany, we won every battle against the Japanese. What people today don't understand is the mentality of the Japanese. They were the ISIS of that day. Whereas Hitler killed 6 million Jews in genocide, the Japanese had killed 10 million Chinese. They wanted to wipe out the entire Chinese race. They had the Japanese Empire. And so in wiping out the Chinese, they had the same mentality with Americans, with allies. For example, right here, this is a war poster. It says this is a war, it's murder. Whenever they found a wounded U.S. soldier, they'd kill him on the spot. We had a submarine actually surrender to the Japanese Navy. The Japanese Navy took every American sailor up on the deck of the ship, laid them down, and took a sledgehammer and smashed their head like a melon. Just went down every one. They took other POWs, burned them alive. They were big time into beheading. This is one of the Allied POWs right here. This is the beheading. They would actually, in the Japanese prisoner of war camps, the Japanese would actually have competitions to see which officer could behead 100 prisoners the fastest. And they had to have runoffs on it as well.
This is also on government record, right? So this is stuff that it's not just you have to find the right history book. Nope, like this is official government record. There's a historian over in Dallas, a World War II military historian, who identifies the Japanese in one execution facility beheaded more people than both atomic bombs took out in Japan.
Wow.
And they call us. Right. And this is where, right, today, people think, oh, America's not really that good of a nation, we should question values. Actually, the only reason we started collecting anything World War II was back in 2014, when these standards came out, the AP U.S. History Standards, and y'all...
Before you read it, let me do the Japanese thing. Go ahead.
Before you read
the standards, so they see what we did before we got...
Okay, so, the standards came out, and the standards of World War II, and by the way, AP History, if you take AP in high school, you don't have to take it in college, right? Because you have shown you're smart enough, you can be kind of exempt, and most colleges don't even require U.S. history anymore anyway. So we know very, very little, but in the AP U.S. history standards, which is the last history most students will ever take, when it comes to the section on World War II, the section on World War II
142 pages of standards.
is this page right here.
That's all of World War II.
What?
That's the entire section of World War II.
3 bullets. That's all of World War II.
And so let me read it and then show them.
Go for it.
The sequence makes sense.
Go for it.
So in this section of World War II, there are it's A, B, C, and D, right? So basically, there's 4 kind of bullets they want you to know. In A, it talks about mass mobilization of American troops. In B, it's wartime experiences, such as the internment of the Japanese Americans, challenges to civil liberties, debates over race and segregation, and the decision to drop the atomic bomb raised questions about American values. There is no mention of Hitler. There is no mention of the Holocaust. There is no mention of anything in the Pacific Theater.
By the way,
there is
right
no
now,
mention.
68% of millennials do not know what Auschwitz is, and 22% of millennials have never heard of the Holocaust. Don't even know what it
Okay?
is.
This does not identify Eisenhower, Patton, Nimitz, Battle of Bulge, D-Day, nothing significant, right? Battle of Midway, Pearl Harbor, nothing identified in this. Now, when this came out, there was a lot of uproar. We were contacted and we're like, hey guys, is this true? And we're like, okay, like on some level, some of this is true. Is it true that there was the internment of the Japanese? 100% is true. And was that wrong? 100% was true. It's always important to keep things in the context of time though.
Right.
Because if you're FDR, and you know Japan has declared war, and you know there are not even American Japanese, there's actual Japanese who are here on temporary visas or right work or they're just visiting. And so you
And
don't know.
They have a death-focused mentality, which is what we saw all war long. They are focused on killing others.
There's no internet technology, right? There's no Excel spreadsheet you can look at. Ellis Island's closed down. The men are being drafted to the military, so your police force is decimated, right? You don't have an immigration force. Like, what are you have 24 hours to make a decision. What decision are you going to make? Now, we can look back and go, what he did was wrong, because it was. But sometimes, you're stuck between a bad or a worse decision. So we can look and go, that was a bad decision. No, 100% it was. That was a bad decision. But if you were in there in that moment, what decision would you make?
Right.
Because I've never had somebody give me a better suggestion, right? But this is the reality of why you study history in the context of what's going on. But what we said is what America did, we have to question American values. There are things we do today that make me question our values, right? But it's not the values of America I question as much as it is the values of humanity, because there's evil people all over the world doing evil things. And this is where I would identify everybody needs Jesus, right? America needs more Jesus. China needs more Jesus. Saudi Arabia needs more Jesus. This is a reality of a flawed humanity and a human condition. And we want to be very honest. When we study history, what guides our history the most is a verse from Romans that all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. I don't feel like I need to show you all the sin in George Washington's life, because my starting place is he's a sinner who needs a Savior. That's my starting place. So I'm never going to be surprised by the flaws of humanity. That's my starting place. But the reason we can celebrate George Washington, the same reason we can celebrate King David, the really flawed, jacked up king of the Bible, right? is because we see how God used him to do something special, right? In spite of all his flawed, jacked up, right, moments. But this isn't what they're saying with America. They're not saying that America had problems in the midst. They're saying, nope, America is bad. This was the position, which is why now most students in America can tell you the problems of America, but cannot tell you the good things about America. They don't understand that we have more freedom, that we have more stability, that we have more prosperity. Well, the outcry was so great on this that the following year they revised that one page. Okay, now, I mean, technically they revised the standards, but it was really that one page that caused the most concern. And so the revision, now instead of one page, there is now 2 pages. Okay? It still is very, very poor.
Still doesn't mention D-Day or Eisenhower or Patton, doesn't mention any of that, but it does mention...
It does at least mention that it uses the word Holocaust. So at least now, There's the acknowledgement of a word that still most kids don't know what it is. But if we ask the question now, obviously, guys, we believe America's flawed, and it's one of the reasons we're getting involved in the process. We're trying to help solve some of those problems, right? It's why you came down for several days, and why we're so grateful. We're praying that God uses you mightily when you go home. We believe there's flaws in America. But in context, it makes a difference. And even if you go back to World War II context, if you're going to say you have to question American values, well, then let's just look honestly at the picture, right? When you're going up against Japan, who does believe that you fight like this was a very religious culture, that you fight to the death. It's honorable for your faith, for your ancestors. So this is what we're going up against. But we didn't just blindly drop atomic bombs. There was something we did before we dropped the bombs.
Yeah. What happened was, at that point in time, we got to figure out what our losses are going to be, because if you're going up against a death cult mentality that thinks death is glorious, and by the way, they trained their young people to deliver suicide bombs, 3,400 suicide bombs delivered by the Japanese. It's ISIS. It is ISIS. Yeah. So we're going up against that. What happened was, we said, okay, if we have to do a D-Day invasion, because these guys are not surrendered. They've lost every one of their allies. They're not winning any battles in the Pacific anywhere. They're losing everything, and they're not giving up. What if we have to invade Japan like we did Germany? If we have to invade Japan, they did the calculations. General Curtis LeMay, who's head of the Army Air Corps, we call it the Air Force today, got the calculations. If we have to invade, because of their mentality, we will lose 1 million Americans. We will lose 2 to 4 million allies, and we will have to kill 5 to 10 million Japanese before we can subdue them. So we're looking somewhere in the vicinity of 15 million that we may have to kill if we invade Japan. And at that point in time, Harry Truman said, I don't think we're going to do that. I've got something different going on. And so what happened was, we had taken the island of Saipan. We now have an atomic bomb that works. Here's the interesting thing about the atomic bomb. The atomic bomb worked. The next week after it worked, we put it on a ship, USS Indianapolis, get it to Saipan, get it ready to go in. The Japanese didn't know what was coming, but we told them. We dropped 70 million of these leaflets right here, 70 million leaflets telling the Japanese 35 cities are about to be bombed by the Americans, including Hiroshima and Nagasaki. We want every civilian out of there. We don't want to hurt a single civilian, but we are going to wipe out the military power. Now, our American flyers did not like this at all, because they now told the Japanese what 35 cities were attacking.
We have letters from pilots where pilots are writing about how angry they are. They're dropping these, not because we're warning somebody, but because we're telling them exactly where we're flying our planes, and they know now we are in much greater danger.
This is a B-29. This is what we used to bomb Tokyo. Traditional bombing, no nukes at all, no atomics at all. Dropped it, 100,000 people died in Tokyo with B-29s. This particular thing in Japanese on the back, it says, Japanese people, you have seen what B-29s can do. We have one bomb that will do what 2,000 B-29s do. Don't make us use that bomb. And so we broadcast every 15 minutes into Japan saying, this bomb is coming, please surrender. We don't want to hurt anyone, but we're going to end the war. Please surrender. So we dropped the first one August the 6th. 150,000 people died between radiation and explosion. Then we came back 3 days later. They wouldn't surrender. We dropped the second one. Nagasaki, again, another 150,000 wiped out. We get ready to drop the third one on the 14th of August. They surrender at that point in time.